Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 40th episode of the Manor Podcast. I'm your co-host, Roger Bodee, joined as always with my best friend and other co-host, Michael Hamilton. Michael, when there's a good light option to play in a video game or like a bad evil option to play in a video game, which route do you usually go down?
I almost always do the light or the good route first. I try to play how I would like naturally feel good. A lot of the time I'll go back through the game and do the evil route because I'm like, I don't want to say I'm a completionist, but I'm like very interested in what happens in the evil route or the bad route. But I usually do the light or good route first. That feels better. What about you?
I am the same. I don't usually go back and do the evil route though, because I just in my experience, it's never like interesting evil routes. Like there's no like good motivation to be evil in the games usually. It's just like I want to be an asshole, and it's like, oh, okay, like that's not interesting to me. It's just like, oh, I don't really just want to like say and be mean to people just for the sake of being like mean and rude to people. That's just not what I want out of my experience. If there's like a motivation, it's just like I think the one that came closest was like in KOTOR. I think that was the only game where like I wound up being tempted by the dark side, but in every other game, it's never appealed to me. And especially in Undertale, like I don't know how people do genocide routes. Like
I loved the genocide routes.
I couldn't get through it, man. I got to oh Sans' brother,
Papyrus.
Papyrus. I killed Papyrus and my real life heart broke and I stopped. I had no motivation. And it's so sad when you kill a whole area and it's just silent. There's no more happy Undertale music. I can't. I couldn't do it. I did not finish it.
I had some support for that. I definitely would not have been able to solo the genocide route. I had Casey with me and we had some friends over too, and we were going through it because
who beat Sans? Who beat Sans?
I beat Sans.
Really? It's impressive.
It only took like 8 hours or something.
I would believe it. That's the other reason why. I was like, wait a second, I have to go through all this sad stuff, and then there's like one of the stupidest, most challenging things in video games just waiting for me. Now I'm good. I'm done.
It was really like fun in a weird way. Like the sheer difficulty of it was just very enjoyable, and like getting better at the fight was fun. I don't know. Hopefully Undertale spoilers aren't too big of a deal. The game's been out for what, 10 years now? Not that long, like 5 years.
I was like, I'm not that old. I can't be that old. It's been out for a long time, but I don't think 10 years.
Yeah.
But yeah. So do you want to spend the rest of the episode talking about the philosophical nuances of Undertale, or do you want to discuss overrated and underrated Flesh and Blood cards?
I don't know. I'm kind of into this Undertale talk. It's been a while since I like played it, but it was a good time.
Yeah. It's on my like list of games to like play through with like Austin at some point in his life. Like it's 100% something he needs to like sit down and play with me at some point.
All right, let's go to Flesh and Blood.
Okay, fair enough.
As much as we would enjoy Undertale talk, I don't think our listeners are here for it.
Okay. Let's start in the spirit of Undertale though. Let's start off with underrated cards in positivity. So I think we both have 6 cards for each list. So do you want to start with that underrated card, or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I'll start with one. So this is a card that sees some play, but this card is like ridiculous. It should see more play than it is, and it's like just like the on hit is very impactful. And the card is Runic Reclamation. It is a 3/7 red that blocks for 3, and when it hits an opponent, you get to destroy an aura and create a rune chant. And man, have I lost some games to Runic Reclamation recently. You cast your Channel Lake Frigid and then they kill it with Runic Reclamation. You're just like, well, just lost the game. It's over.
Yeah, that's actually on my list too, because of like how impactful it's been in our testing lately. And like there's so many weird like setup cards that are starting to come into play more and more in Flesh and Blood. And as people start turning to auras to kind of play longer games, setup based heroes, answer like Runic Reclamation is just like super powerful and punishing for those strategies. And like you were saying, like we were playing a bunch of like Viserai into Icelander, or you were at least, and we were like, oh, this matchup's like super easy. Like it's not even a close game. And then we kept having the experience, like you just said, where we just play your Channel Lake Frigid and be like, haha, what are you going to do now, idiot? And they're like, oh, well, here's a Runic Reclamation. And you're like, oh, I have 2 blocks in my hand because I'm Icelander.
And even if you have enough cards to block to keep the channel in play, then you don't have a blue ice card left to keep the channel around. And if you block with Coronet Peak, then you don't have your Coronet Peak to pitch in a blue ice card to keep channel around. It's just like it never lines up.
Yeah, and I was like, "Oh, well, it's just lucky that nobody played it against Michael ever," because he's had a lot of famous matches against Briars, over the past couple of tournaments. And I looked in everybody's list that played Briar. Nobody's playing Runic Reclamation. 0 people have been playing Runic
Prism
Reclamation.
rotated. So what auras would you need to kill?
Especially when Hypothermia was around and stuff like that. I don't know, because, would you still let's say you made an embodiment of Lightning token. No, because it doesn't gain go again. I don't know.
I don't actually know how that interaction would work
Yeah, we
because
need Just Scott here.
yeah. So it was on your list as well.
It was. It is actually one of the cards on my list.
Okay.
And
Underrated card, Runic Reclamation. If you're dying to Icelander, try it out.
yeah. And it especially is gonna destroy my other underrated card, Enchanting Melody. Or maybe it doesn't, actually, because Enchanting Melody would just be destroyed from ward before the damage actually matters. So Enchanting Melody is a good aura to play to counter the Runic Reclamations. So
I don't think Enchanting Melody is just a good card to play. You just shouldn't have that in your deck, probably.
hear me out. There's a theory in Flesh and Blood that I'm working on, the grand unifying theory, that sometimes you take low value plays on an individual turn cycle in order to have higher value turn cycles on a later future turn. And obviously the inspiration for this idea is Bolton, because so many of Bolton's turns are pretty below rate and bad value. But if you know that you want to mitigate some on hits or damage, and especially if you have good blocking equipment that you can combine with Enchanting Melody, being able to stuff an opponent's big attack, like Command and Conquer, or I guess specifically against Guardians, I think this card's pretty good. And not having to deal with their crush effects or their pummel effects or things like that, because it's going to be very hard for them to get over it. And then you just get to come back with your full hand because you didn't use anything to block. 'Cause it cheats the fundamentals of Flesh and Blood, right? Because normally what it's supposed to be is if you're using cards defensively to stop damage, you then don't have them on offense. And basically what it's letting you do is prepay for that defense in order to have those cards on offense the following turn cycle. And I don't know. It hasn't seen a lot of play yet. I think there's going to be spots and there's going to be decks that are really going to want to be playing this tempo heavy game and maximize the full value of hand sooner or later. So I think I could see a world where this card starts popping up for sure.
Yeah. So for the most part, this card is worse than Sink Below or Fate Foreseen because you're spending 2 resources to block for 4 instead of just 0 resources, or 2 resources and a card to block for 4 instead of 0 resources and a card to block for 4. But where that is broken is if you play Enchanting Melody on one of your turns and then your opponent hits you and you don't have to block now and you get to keep a 5 card hand, and then the sum of those 5 cards is or the 5th card is worth significantly more than the 4 cards would be with a Sink Below, basically. So with setup decks and combo decks, it kind of makes more sense to put Enchanting Melody in. You play the Enchanting Melody if you know you're going to have the combo next turn. Potentially it's a second cycle kind of thing, or something's going on where you know you're going to combo the following turn and you need a 5 card hand. You set up your Enchanting Melody, they do whatever to hit you, and then you don't have to block with cards in your hand to prevent their on hits or whatever. You use that plus some equipment, and then you get to play your 5 card hand that basically needs to recoup that 2 extra points of value of resources you had to pitch to play the Enchanting Melody compared to a Sink Below or a Fate Foreseen. But if you make up for that 2 resources because your 5th card adds let's say 6 damage or something to your hand, then yeah, it makes out. It makes sense. It checks out. And I remember back when you were working on OTK Viscerai and the Starvo Prism Viscerai metagame, you were a big advocate of this card because when you were playing OTK Viscerai against Starvo, you basically didn't have time to get all the way to second cycle before you had to combo. You usually had to combo at some point before that because eventually they were just going to dominate a bunch of big attacks in a row. And so because you had to combo sooner, if you had all these defense reactions in your deck, when you Sonata'd, you would reveal a lot less attacks and non-attacks because you'd be revealing these defense reactions that you didn't have time to get out of your deck by going to second cycle. So Enchanting Melody was kind of a card you used to address that problem, and I think it made a lot of sense in that context.
Yeah, that was actually what I was gonna talk about next, and OTK Viscera, I think, was, like, the best example of where a card like Enchanting Melody really shined. I didn't do well on that weekend, such as life, you can do your best to reveal, 10 cards with Sonata, but sometimes you'll still just reveal 9 attack actions, and, so there's just still a good level of variance to that deck, unfortunately, despite my best attempts to, like, smooth it out, but overall, in the long run, I felt like that would have been, like, the way to build that deck, and I think that when especially in decks that are going to care about things like having non-attack actions, like if you get some kind of benefit for generating an aura or having something with ward, like now that it's going to be errata with ward, if there's an illusionist that's comes out down the line that cares about having auras with ward on the battlefield or something like that, and you get like extra benefit for it, and then you get to choose between your replacement effect of whether or not you want like your ward 1 to pop on like a Kadachi swing versus this ward 4, or like there's going to be ways that you'll probably want some bigger sources of damage prevention on the field, for like more setup based decks. And I don't know, it's just a card that I think, like I said, is very underrated. Maybe not in like the current design space of Flesh and Blood, but I think as more and more setup based start coming into existence, it has the potential to really help enable them to get to those points where they're ready to like combo off or do their uh powerful thing that makes up for the mopiness of playing Enchanting Melody. I don't think like decks like Dash or Fi should be playing like Enchanting Melody in like their decks to help soak up damage to prevent on hits and stuff like that. Like that's not what I'm advocating for. I just think, like I said, that it's just something that's you trade off the mopey turn cycle that you play it on to have the higher upside on a future turn cycle. That's all.
Yeah, in a world where like combo fi, if Art of War wasn't drawing 2 cards, so like you don't want to. If it was like a combo fi deck, but the Art of War did some other effect that was equally powerful, but was not drawing random cards off the deck, I could see a setup card like this, like a defensive setup card. Because with combo fi, you need to keep like most of your equipment. You want a 5 card hand, and it would make sense to have a card like this to help against like Bravo and Oldheim and stuff.
And I can even see a world like where this is okay against Dromai because or in Dromai because it's a red go again. It gets to keep staying around as long as you're playing a non-attack action on your turn, which you're Dromai, so you're going to be playing non-attack actions because of your dragons. And then so you basically just get to keep this damage prevention effect on the field, and like if your opponent attacks your dragons, okay, you still have this damage prevention effect floating that's just going to keep carrying over turn cycle after turn cycle after turn cycle. Then eventually, uh, it's going to get its value out of it. But I guess I don't know, maybe not. But that's just kind of like maybe my loose idea for where I could sit right now. Maybe.
Yeah, we'll see. We also, what's the current weapon that uh
Oh, Iris of
Iris
Reality.
of Reality?
Maybe
Iris of Reality can attack with it. So maybe there's some aura build that's like ward heavy, Iris heavy that might want this card at some point. I don't think we
you've
have the tools
inspired
right
me
now,
now. You've
but
inspired me.
okay. Moving on to my next card.
Go for it, buddy.
On the subject of illusionists, I think this card is reasonably above rate. It is Phantasmaclasm. It is a 3 for 9 with Phantasm. But when you attack with it, you get to look at their hand, take 1 card, put it on the bottom, and they get to draw a new card. So I guess a card that kind of recently has been, I guess, the talk of the town since Dynasty is Pulse Wave Harpoon, where like you're kind of able to disrupt people's hands. This has like a similar disruption effect, but it's also just above rate. 3 for 9. I love Wounded Bull. It's a 3 for 8. And 3 for 9 is big.
I can tell you've never actually cast this card before, have you?
I have not.
So what you do is you cast it, and your opponent reveals their hand. You're like, oh, you have no poppers. Well, it's not a May ability, so I guess I'll just take this random card. Your opponent goes, okay. They put a card at the bottom, and then they draw the popper. It's 100% of the time. That's just is what happens. They draw the popper, and then they pop your Phantasmaclasm, and you're just like, oh, I guess I'm sad now. And yeah. I don't know. So like the reason why I never saw a lot of play in Prism, right, is because Prism cared about pitching yellows to give Illusionist tax go again, and this card costs 3. So you'd have to pitch 2 cards in order to play it, and then you're 3-card nining, which is like
Yeah, 3 card 9 is not very good. It did see some play in Prism decks. I think there was a Prism that top aided Vegas with it back in the chain metagame. Um, I don't. I think it kind of fell out of favor when the blue auras got printed because there were just more powerful things to be doing when you had like 27 broken auras, and then your reds were very contested. I guess you had to be very careful about what reds you put in because they weren't yellows and they weren't blues and they weren't broken auras. So you couldn't put too many reds in your deck.
yeah, and then the reason why it doesn't see play in Dromai right now is because obviously there's not a lot of blue. Some decks like play like 6 blues total in the entire list, and then when you're pitching 3 cards to play this and you're 4-card nining, that's a
Don't
pretty
4 card 9.
that's a pretty bad rate. So
Yeah, I think the Iris Dromite decks are playing it, which makes sense to me. It's just like big slaps. You have enough blues to afford it. I don't know.
yeah, I mean that makes sense because that they want to be playing a lot of blues in order to activate their auras to swing for 4. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think it's fine. I think the drawbacks that are attached to it are very real. Obviously, it has Phantasm, and I think the fact that the draw or the replacement effect on the hand is not optional, um, because even if they don't draw Popper, right? Let's say they don't have a very good hand, or like they were incentivized to block with their hand. If you take a card and then that like you just crown a Providence them for free, and they're like, "Oh, my hand's sick now. I'll take my 9 and then present like 12 damage back to you." Like that's not a good exchange that you were just forced to make then at that point. Um, so yeah, I just think like that forced draw is a pretty big downside, I guess.
Yeah, the card would be significantly better if it was optional to not take a card because sometimes you look at their hand, you're like, their hand doesn't function. Sometimes you can fix their hand. I think that doesn't happen the majority of times, but it would be a pretty big power bump to the card if you could choose not to take a card after you see their hand.
We're doing some live research right now.
What are we researching?
We're seeing we need to read very specific lines on an item because there's the item Talisman of Ties. If opponent would draw one or more cards during your action phase, instead destroy and they draw that card's -1. So if you play Talisman of Ties with this card, you just actually just thought seize them, which is kind of sick.
Okay, that sounds not the worst.
Because then you're just trading a card for a card. You're trading Talisman of Tides for a card out of their hand on a key turn cycle.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
don't
that
know.
does sound like potential is there.
I'm inspired now. You've convinced me now that I've seen
That
Talisman of Tides.
the card gets there on rate. Like a 3 for 9 that gets to look at their hand and remove any card is very powerful. Even if it's replaced, like you take their best card and replace it with a random card from their deck. Most of the time, it's going to be a pretty good exchange for you, and 3 for 9 is a pretty good exchange. Looks a lot more questionable in decks with high popper counts, but still, it's a powerful effect.
PT3, Talisman of Tides, Phantasmaclasm, Dromai build. Here we come, baby.
I'm ready. You can throw your 2 mana enchantment in there too.
Oh yeah, and then we're also gonna put my next underrated card in there for sure. Then because it's also a blue item and it's Energy Potion, and you might be like, Roger,
I almost put that on my overrated list.
wow, that's crazy. Roger, Energy Potion sees like a good amount of play already. It's in like sideboards against ice decks. And you're like, yeah. But like, once again, if we go to my theory of carrying over to future value being important going forward, um, so if there's a turn cycle where those 2 resources can net you like an extra, 6 or 7 damage or enable a combo that like wins you the game, that's like a very good effect then obviously, and I like it less and less. So I guess in the context of it like just being a good hedge against like ice heroes, like sure it's an overrated card, but from like the perspective of just carrying those 2 future resources into doing something degenerate, I think it's underrated. And as we're seeing a theme here, and we'll continue to see a theme across my cards, I'm very interested in setup decks and exploring those options where they get to break the fundamental like game engine of Flesh and Blood. And I think Energy Potion is just one of those cards.
Yeah, if you kind of look at what we've seen set up decks, we've seen Sabers Boltons always played energy potions or frequently played energy potions. We've seen Kano always plays 3 energy potions. We've seen Icelander usually plays 2 or 3 energy potions. What other setup decks are there? Dorinthia, maybe?
I mean, that exists right now. Like, I could see like in a world where actually like Viscera probably should have played like energy potions, just because like you could have dumped them into extra Sonata hits and stuff like that.
Yeah, spending a whole card in an action point to get
Well, you play like
+1
a
on your
Rune Blade
Sonata doesn't
non-attack
seem good.
action, or is it when you play a Rune Blade card?
It's
How
when
did?
you play a Runeblade card if you played a non-attack action to get a rune
Ah,
chance. So you'd
okay.
have to energy push. You'd energy push when I have to go again. So I guess I've seen energy potion in like I feel like every setup deck and every big combo deck has played energy potion. So I feel like by that sense, it's hard for me to see it as underrated. And I kind of wanted to put it in overrated because spending a whole action point and a card for 2 resources is not a good deal. Those 2 resources have to like be worth essentially 4 resources to get your value worth because you spend an action point and a full card on it. So most decks aren't going to do that. And it is a blue, which is nice. It's hard for your blues to get full value a lot of the time, but it also doesn't block, which is a pretty big liability on your blues. Sometimes you just draw 2 blue energy potions and they attack you, and you're like, dang, I wish I could have blocked one of these.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe I'm just too high on my energy potion, but damn it, man, I like energy potion. But let's get off of it then. Tell me about your phenomenal underrated cards that I'm not talking about on my list. And Michael, you show me what's up.
So I got a setup card for you, and I think you don't like the setup card, but I think it's a sick setup card. It's Flock of the Featherwalkers. So this costs at red, it costs 1 resource. It comes in for 5, and you have to reveal some cheap card to play. But you're gonna arsenal that card anyway, so it doesn't matter that much. And you get a quicken token when you play it. So 1 for 5, cost your action point. That's right at rate before the quicken token, and you don't have to hit to get this quicken token. You just play the flock, and boom, you got a quicken token next turn. Set up just like that on rate and setups sets up for next turn. Great
Yeah,
card.
I mean, this is not a great card. I don't
Great
like this
card.
card. The reason why is because if you think about what's going to happen on the prior turn cycle, is your opponent's going to do something like attack you a whole bunch, and you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to block with 1 card now because I need 3 cards to enable this. I need to pitch a card, I need to play the flock, and I need to reveal a card. So if you're not doing anything else, you have just spent a whole turn cycle getting beat up, but you need 3 cards to do it. And what I like the most out of my setup cards is if they can just be played freely by themselves after you use 2 or 3 cards to block, or they're just you can use 2 cards. And that's why the 0 cost charge cards are so good out of Bolton, is because you get to, if you just want to, you can block with 2 cards. I guess good is a little
So good is very strong.
a little
I think they are mediocre at best. They fill the role.
the reason okay, I'll rephrase it. The reason why the 0 cost charge cards are good in setting up in Bolton, I'll put a condition on them, is because like I said, you get to block 2, play your charge card, charge the other card, and it costs 0, so you didn't need a third card to pitch for it. And that's kind of why take flight can be kind of awkward in the deck sometimes when you're just like trying to set up and do things, because you're not really trying to push through much damage, and usually you're just kind of like 3 cards, 6 at that point for the card to pitch, card to charge, and you're just going to come in with a mobile saber, and your opponent's going to look at your what you're doing and be like, yeah, whatever, idiot, I'll take 6 and 30 you back. Um, so I guess in that sense, like I think Flock is just worse because then also in the situations where you want to block with it, it blocks for 2. And I've tried Flock of the Featherwalkers in a good amount of decks, and I have never been happy with it. So maybe I'm just missing something though. I'm not the world champion, so you can show me how to Flock.
Yeah, you have to find like good ways to use it. Like you have to be able to utilize your other 2 resources from when you pitch the blue at the start of your turn. So like Kodachi into Flock is a pretty good line. Um Cough ninjas coming up. Cough Flock should probably be at least tested
So that way, when
in
you
your
lead with
Katsu decks.
Surging Strike, it'll have go again. Okay, I see.
So when you lead with one of your 6 gust waves, because we're not getting more surging strikes, then you can play your Gust Wave with fall or with Go Again, and follow it up with your next thing off your
Yeah,
quick
but that
attack
new one
ability.
needs Surging Strike, Gust Wave, the Ancestry, and it needs them all to be on the chain in order for it to do its thing.
Yeah, but it's also a blue block 3 that's a solid card. A blue 0 cost block 3 that's a solid card when you don't do the thing too. So
I mean,
or
Ninja's
maybe.
not hurting
So
for 0 cost block threes that have combo effects at the end of like.
I mean,
There's already
so
like a bunch of those printed, so
it's a 0 for 2 blue combo 3 block,
there's
which
already
is
6 of
like
those that
there's
exist.
I know there's a bunch of them, but this one has significantly higher upside than the other ones because if you do have the stupid Katsu, all the other
It
things,
also has
then
a significantly higher ask than all
it's
the other ones.
+2. The other ones, well, you
We're
don't
not going to
usually
talk
even
about that. I'm
play
not
the
going to rain on that cards
combo.
parade. I'm going to let everybody freak out on Twitter and be like, "Oh my god, they're going to lose hero abilities! I can't believe it." I'm like, "Okay, it's very much going to happen. Nobody ever does any. Nobody plays Pommel or Channel like Frigid or no. You just it's going to happen."
So,
Okay,
Flock of the Featherwalkers, at rate before the Quicken token. You have to do a lot of work. You had to do a lot of work for Belittle too. It was a card that was reasonably above rate that you always disliked, but you do the work, the card's going to be good. And we'll find it. I believe we will find a deck that Flock is very good in at some point.
and you know a deck that is playing Flock of the Featherwalkers is going to want to reveal to Flock of the Featherwalkers is Exude Confidence because that's
That's a good one to get going
next on
again.
my underrated list, and I've seen some play mostly in like Briar, but I think it's just an underrated like aggro card in general, especially in decks that have like everybody thinks like, oh, I can just play all these snatches in my deck because I'll just give it go again with Snapdragon Scalers or something like that. Or if you're gonna run effects like Razor Reflex, I think Razor Reflex in combination with Exude Confidence is like very underplayed because obviously if your opponent's not blocking it with a card that has higher power, they're just blocked out from playing defense reactions and or even effects like that can pump it at instant speed outside of its ability, like lightning press or I guess lunging press, if they're only blocking with 4 power cards. Because then you don't have to go to reactions in order for them to not be able to play defense reactions. But I've just seen so many times where this card is played, and I've also had it played against me, and I'm just like, oh, I'm dead. Like your opponent plays an Exude Confidence, and you have like a Sink Below in Arsenal or in your hand or something like that. And you're like, okay, well, I have to block with like my highest, most threatening card in this endgame situation in order to hope that they like can't pump it further. And if they do pump it further, I'm dead. And if they, oh, so I could just like completely overblock it. But then like, how do I block a future thing that comes up? So it just puts you in like a lose, 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 lose situation in just a lot of spots. I think uh it not having go again and it only blocking for 2 obviously are pretty big innate downsides to it, but the ceiling on this card is just like insane when you think about it.
Yeah, especially if we're like looking at a metagame where fatigue is running rampant with the format. It's like if you set up a big turn where you like pump this up, give it go again, it comes in for 7 or 10 or something with go again. They don't have their pulverize or their only card that blocks it. Then it's going to be a lot really hard for them to leverage their resources the way they want to during the turn. So yeah, I don't know. It's a powerful card.
Yeah. I'm excited to exude some confidence with Flock of the Featherwalkers in this Dromiris build with Phantasmaclasms in it.
All right, my next card. My next card is Electrify, which strangely, I think this is the strongest of the cycle, and it's seen the least play of the 3. Polar Blast, So Tomorrow, and Electrify. So, do you remember Plunder Run?
Go
The old
on.
zero for 3 draw a card, non-attack action. Electrify is 1 for 3 draw a card, but which is reasonably worse than Plunder Run. But you always get the draw card. You don't always get the 3 power. It plays really well with attack reactions, and if you care about either lightning cards or non-attack actions, it is good in both of those spots. And a lot of the time, this is 1 resource for 3 damage, and the card, and you replace it with it by drawing a new card. So it's just a very powerful card that has not seen basically any play, I feel like.
I'll dial back my incredulity because I guess I was thinking it in more like context of Briar. But as future builds of Lexi keep showing themselves as wanting to go like pretty wide, even in like the icy versions, um, being able to have an effect like this that's going to push extra damage across one of your arrows, because it's very rare your opponent's going to be able to just like block out if you're attacking with 3 arrows in a turn cycle. Like it's asking a lot of them, and I guess even in the situations where they do fully block it out and, I guess you don't get your 3 points of value, you're getting, like, the value in it in tempo because they just were forced to use a lot of critical resources, probably equipment or something like that in order to block out all the arrows on the turn cycle. And I know you said red, but, like, maybe even blue's worth it because there's also a lot of effects in, Ranger, not all of them, but that just care about the dealing damage to a player, not on hits specifically. So the fact that an electrify can give your next arrow go again, which then you're free to pump and then you fuse it, and then all of your arrows on hit for the rest of the turn will threaten that second frostbite or on like or on damage effect, I should say, instead of on hit. It is a pretty powerful thing. So um, maybe there's like a better way for Lexis to be utilizing this card that we haven't currently seen. And I guess like in the context that we've only seen like 2 lightning heroes so far, so maybe it'll be cracked in like a third lightning hero down the line as well.
Yeah. Oh, we've seen Starvo also, and Starvo did not want Electrify.
Yeah, because it's too busy just killing you with everything else. I mean, like, but you know what card Starvo did want but didn't play, but people just didn't know it at the time. Or I guess, do you have anything else to say about your card?
Oh,
I didn't
I'm
let you
good.
to find a word
Electrify
on it.
sick.
Okay, Electrify's good. I have Ophidia is really good, and it's going to be like a million, bajillion, billion, $1,000,000.
That was my next card. Go ahead. Go ahead. Talk about Iowa.
Yeah, any deck that's like looking to like draw cards, or like especially like I'm shocked, like actually shocked that this has not seen play in like Lexi to date yet, because casting Eye of or pitching Eye of Ophidia to a 3 of a kind lets you look at 5 cards potentially, and that's disgusting. Like that's just so many cards.
Yeah, I think especially in combination with Death Dealer, where it's a card that you really care about what the next card you draw is. Also with Crown of Seeds, we saw that interaction. Some of the PT1 Starvo lists did figure out I have Ophidia and played it, and it combined really well when you were pitching it to Crown to find your third Starvo fuse card. But in combination with Death Dealer specifically, I think is where this card really shines because Death Dealer, you're drawing one card and you need to be able to use it that turn. And a lot of the time, you're looking for a very specific red card, or like you're looking for a pump, or you're looking for a go in attack, or you're looking for something kind of specific. And I just sets that up perfectly. And Azalea, especially, you can pitch to Death Dealer, you choose which of the 2 cards you want to draw, and then your Azalea ability is ready, and you have the other one sitting on top that you Azalea into. It's just it does a lot of powerful things when you are manipulating a card that you're going to draw on that specific turn.
Yeah, and if people are predicting that like Azalea is going to be really good, or Rangers are going to have like a renaissance coming up after Outsiders, this is definitely a card I would recommend people start picking up sooner rather than later if you're able to. Obviously, it's not cheap. I think it's like $300 to $400, somewhere in that middle price. It's not as expensive as Heart right now, but I could easily see this being more expensive than Heart in the long run, because it was like okay in Icelander, but like I think it has the potential to be like actually busted eventually in like some kind of combination of a deck that like is drawing a lot of cards, looking a lot of cards, or cares about like top of their deck in some manner.
Yeah, and this is a card that similar to Heart, I really don't like that it's good, and it's like probably going to be a tournament staple in some decks because I think like the barrier to entry on these fables is really high, and it's just like shelling out 200, 300, $400 for one card. It's kind of gross. I don't like that, and yeah, I don't know. That's all.
Yeah, and like Heart of Findall's like $600 now, pushing that, and I think I don't know if there's less uh Eye of Ophidias out there. I don't think they printed as much unlimited Arcane Rising as they did Unlimited Welcome to Wraith. I feel like they like super printed a lot of Welcome to Wraith just because it's just like the fundamental Flesh and Blood set. The limited was so good for it, whereas Arcane Rising is just like not that. And so I can't speak to like the specific print numbers of how many hearts versus Eyes of Ophidians there are out there, but like my gut would say that I would quickly become more expensive than Heart due to supply issues as well, which, LSS could just put a cap on this right now and just I think what they could do is just ban it in Classic Constructed. Like I think in time, Living Legend is going to be a luxury format, anyways, similar to like how Legacy was for Magic the Gathering, because like 5-10 years from now, if you need like a Phantasmal Footsteps and they haven't printed it since like Monarch, like what do you like? Do you think Phantasmal Footsteps is just going to be like cheap for forever in like 5 or 6 years if Living Legend picks up on popularity? I don't see that being the case. So like if they still do, if like these fables start being busted and they're busted in a format like Living Legend, that's like a niche, highly competitive, like luxury format, I'm okay with that. Or they're good in like PVE. I don't know how to feel about them in Blitz. But I feel like the cost of running them in Blitz is a lot higher because your list is so much tighter. So having a card like this that like could be potentially pretty clunky is like a lot higher of a risk. But I think the more I've been chewing on this a lot. I think just banning it in class constructed could help maintain their like collectors like value and like desirability while keeping the barrier to entry to classic constructed more reasonable for everybody.
What was the fable in Dynasty? It was
um
Command and Conquer, right?
yeah, and
Okay,
I
never
think
mind.
they've recognized that like that like please just never make a mechanically unique fable ever. Like if there's a mechanically unique fable in Outsiders, I'll be like pretty sad.
Because like something like Bolton's gem from Dynasty could be a fable. Like it kind of feels like Arc Shard, where it's a Bolton card that is
And it's the design of it too.
legendary
I
and
think maybe LSS kind of realized like that designing mechanically unique fables is weird because if you look at it too, like Soraya is like the legendary in that set. So like you have the Emperor, Soraya, and then like this Bolton card at the end, and then the Fabled's Command and Conquer. I feel like hopefully somewhere in the middle of that design, they just lowered the rarity of Spirit down to legendary, and then made Command and Conquer the Fable. And I really really like design philosophies of like print like if you can make like a fabled artivore, could you imagine it like a full art like
ready to move on to last ones. You've got one left, right?
no, you took it with Runic Reclamation.
Oh, was that your six? You have an equipment, right?
Oh, Courage of Blade Hold. I just glossed over it because I just assumed everybody figured that one out by now. But yeah, Courage of Blade Hold. Go ahead.
My last card is Scabskin Leathers. I think this card is very, very strong. I remember when the new Brute gloves got printed, or Brute boots got printed, people were talking about replacing Scabskin Leathers with them. But first off, these boots block for 3, which is insane. We
More
haven't
than
had
one.
boots that
Mhm.
block for 2 and then block for 1. The closest, I think, is the Ranger ones that block for 2 and then break. Perch Grapplers.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of anything else blocks for 2 at foot that is an Iron Hide. I don't know off the top of my head.
I guess Valiant
Well,
Dynamo
that one blocks
can
for
sometimes
infinite
block.
technically, but
So just like having a boot slot that's worth 3 points of value before you get to anything else, and it's also stopping on hits and stuff. That's just really, really powerful. And then the chance of turning mopey turns into turns that can deal like significantly more damage than they would just by rolling them and getting an extra action point. Like it's not a risk you take that often, but sometimes it's going to turn like hands that would deal like 6 damage with 1 action point into dealing 11. And that happens when you go second a lot of the time. You just roll the Scabskins because you have 4 card hands. How are you going to spend it? Well, you need more action points. You just roll it on your first turn when you go second, or on turns where your opponent maybe blocks a decent amount and then plays a setup item or something. Then you have a 4 card hand. Then you can roll the Scabskins to try to get more value out of your hand, because otherwise, Reinhardt doesn't have a ton of access to go again. And uh, I'm blanking. What's the shadow brute's name? Levia.
Levia, yeah.
Levia
Everybody
also doesn't
forgets about
have
her, so don't feel
a lot
bad.
of action, a lot of access to go again. So like taking 4 card hands that you're not like not blocking to get these 4 card hands, but sometimes your opponent's just going to not threaten you. They won't give you an opportunity to block, and you'll have a 4 card hand. And having Scabsons as an option there is a reasonable amount of upside for your boots that already block for 3.
Yeah, that's fair. I will say, I guess the only thing that pops in my mind is that just like I don't like the dice rolling mechanics that's attached to them. I feel like there's potential for some real malfeasance for people who are looking to like cheat in Flesh and Blood eventually. Uh I'm just really wary of like a loaded die or just like even a semi-loaded die just coming in and like really like breaking them in like a rules game breaking way. I wish there was like a different way you could design them that didn't require like the like random instrument. I don't know how you would do that necessarily. Um, but yeah, outside of that, putting that aside, I do agree. Like the fact that they block for 3, and that there's even like you have to give up your arm piece to run the gambler's gloves, but the fact that you could even like mitigate the variance on them, and if they ever start printing like different ways, like different brute um like headpieces that maybe block as well, so gambler's gloves doesn't need to be played, and then you get like a real arm slot again or something like that. um it definitely has the potential to like also improve a lot in the future as well. So obviously the average value of it is like 2 action points, right? Or 1.5. So uh there's the only thing that's like going to happen to it though is like it's one of those things where it's just a law of large numbers, where the more your deck is looking to like abuse it, the more likely it is that like you will eventually hit that one. 1 out of 6 dice rolls you'll roll a 1 on average, I think is the math last I checked.
Sounds about right to me.
So the more you're rolling them, obviously the more likely it is you're going to hit like that 1. And what I would like to see is that like a lightning brute or something like that, or a way to like a card in your hand you could have that you could play at instant speed. Because the reason why I said lightning brute is that like let's say you roll your scab skins and you have a blink in your hand. So either you could use this blink as a way to pay for this extra card you want to use for these 2 action points, or let's say like, oh, I rolled a 0 or I rolled a 1. Oops. Well, I'm going to blink myself out of this and then still be able to play this other card and still have a functional turn. So if there's cards like blink that exist that let you like instant speed recoup an action point or something like that, I think it obviously also greatly improves like the downside of this. I guess the cautionary person to me just wants a lot of ways to mitigate that downside, even though they are still good. So, anyways,
Yeah, I think it definitely makes sense that you want ways to mitigate the downside. And if these boots didn't have the downside of rolling a 1, I think they'd be like beyond broken.
oh yeah, obviously, yeah.
Like if when you roll a 1, you just still got 1 action point or something. Maybe you take down the upside of 6 to only giving you 2 action points as well. It's still just these boots are like super good where there's no downside to rolling them every turn. So there has to be like some risk in rolling them. Otherwise, they're just going to be broken, for lack of a better word.
I think like maybe you still get an action point on a 1, but like you take like 5 damage or something like that. That's maybe something better. I just think the penalty of like potentially losing a whole turn cycle and like 4 cards worth of value if you roll a 1 is like, that's like a game
Yeah.
losing risk, you know?
Yeah, it is. And there is one card they printed that I kind of liked the design of, but I think it was way too bad on rate. I can't remember the name of it, but it was a card that said when you roll dice this turn, you roll 2 dice and you take the higher value one instead of just rolling 1 dice, which I can't remember the name of this card. And I remember reading this card and being like, this is a cool idea, but this card is so far below rate, it's never going to see play.
It's a Kaio specialization.
Okay. Oh, so maybe it will be good enough because it's a Kaio card.
Ready to
Kaio.
roll 0. It's a brute non-attack action. That costs, it's a blue and blocks for 3. You know, the things that brutes really need. And if you would roll 1 or more die this turn, instead roll that many die plus 1 and ignore the lowest roll. So it'll be really good eventually when they start coming out with the roll 5 die and then play Yahtzee. the Yahtzee deck that LSS is brewing for the brutes in the upcoming sets, getting to roll an extra set to make sure you hit Yahtzee in your brute deck is going to be like really powerful in Kaio. So I guess I'm looking forward to that.
Anyway, so the design of it lowering variance and die rolling is kind of cool. And I think Scouts and Others very good without any of this low variance stuff. And I think it's kind of silly to talk about playing the other brute boots over Scouts and Others when you're giving up 2 whole points of block for that effect.
You know what, Michael? I'm looking at the time, buddy. We're at 47 minutes.
It's gonna be a long episode. Are we just not doing overrated cards?
We could do overrated episode as its own episode.
That's a standalone episode.
Yeah, we did underrated episodes. We need the content.
I mean, yeah, I guess we don't. We don't have spoilers next.
No, it's next week. We have to get through the whole. Yeah, we have to record one more podcast on the 28th. I can edit all this out.
Okay, I'm down. We can do overrated next week. Okay,
Michael. Well, I'm glad we have explored a lot of the more underrated cards. We have some pretty strong disagreements, but I'm glad we at least agreed on some of the more underrated cards in Flesh and Blood, Runic Reclamation and Eye of Ophidia. Maybe we shouldn't have talked about Eye of Ophidia, but oh well, Fables are what they are.
Yeah, I haven't bought my Eye of Ophidia yet, so don't spike the price on me, guys. Don't do that.
Oh, I have every Fabled in the game except for Corsham, but I mean, like, who's gonna break Corsham?
The first one I bought was Heart, and after Nationals, I was like, I need to buy this Heart before the price spikes, and yeah, Hamal Patel hooked me up. So,
and then, but funnily enough, Corsham was the first Fabled we opened. We were just cracking Tales of Aria, practicing Sealed, and you like freaked out. Like, oh, I opened.
As I cold boil. I don't want to touch this.
And like now they're like $5. Corsham is just like a door stopper because it's just like the worst Fable. Like if they keep lowering the power level of Fables to Corsham, sure.
Yeah, Blood of the Dracide also. Right now it's not very good. I think maybe if we get another Draconic set, it'll move up. But for now, there's just not enough Draconic cards, I feel like, to make it good. Not enough Draconic 1 costs.
But still, better be safe than sorry. Just don't make mechanically unique ones anymore. And who knows? Maybe next week we'll even talk about overrated cards. We'll get a little spicy here. And
I did already hint that Energy Potion almost made my overrated list, so we're probably doing overrated next week, right?
Okay, yeah, we're doing overrated. We got to fill this time in between spoilers. We're gonna do overrated cards next week, and then we get to dive deep into the first wave of spoilers for Outsiders, baby, including your own spoiler card, which comes out on Saturday, March 4th.
It's exciting.
I know.
Can't wait.
I'm very excited to draft this card. Limited All-Star. Our draft or is our card. That's the only spoiler for the spoiler that people are going to get.
All right. Sounds good. Limited All-Star card coming up.
Yeah. Do you have any final closing thoughts though, Michael?
No, I don't think so. I think I'm ready to wrap it up.
Well, the next time you're trying to figure out underrated cards in Flesh and Blood, always remember, mind your manners. Thanks for watching, everybody.